Welcome to this chat about politics on BuffaloNews.com. I'm Bruce Andriatch, Managing Editor of the Buffalo News, and I'm joined by Justin Sondel, who has spent the last several months looking into the Buffalo mayoral primary, which concluded yesterday with a victory by Sean Ryan. First step in a political process that will end in November with the mayoral election. But we're still talking about the primary because it was very involved, a lot of candidates involved. But I think we knew, Justin, leading up to it, that the two favorites were Sean Ryan and Chris Scanlon, partly because of the amount of money they spent, name recognition, etc. The narrative leading into it was that this was going to be maybe even too close to call. It didn't turn out that way. Ryan won, he might not say easily, but it was by more than I think I expected. Was that surprising to you that it ended up the way it did?
It certainly was. Political insiders, people in the campaigns were all telling us that they expected it to be extremely close. 11 points in a race with 5 people is a pretty significant margin of victory. I think going into it, you could see the energy behind the campaigns was kind of frantic. They really felt like they had to fight for every vote. And there was a significant door-knocking campaign from all the candidates. I think what you saw was Ryan and Scanlon had the money and the volunteers to really get out there, and that is part of the reason that money is so important in political campaigns.
Right. It's tough to fully analyze something like this. It just ended less than 24 hours ago. But what were some of the factors that you think tipped the scale in Ryan's favor?
Well, we just talked about the door knocking, and I think you cannot undercount the role that organized labor played. Scanlon had significant support from organized labor, but Sean Ryan had many, many union organizations working on his behalf. It's right there in the name, organized. They are excellent organizations at getting out the vote, getting people knocking on doors, calling their friends, phone banking. And I think that really, really showed up when it came to, even with a pretty low turnout, the people who turned out came out for Ryan.
There was no end of opportunities for voters to get to know these 6 candidates. We include Michael Gaynor, who did not run yesterday, but was on an independent line and maybe in November. But the question now turns to those remaining candidates. We know from your reporting today that former Fire Commissioner Garnell Whitfield is off the ballot pending his appeal. That leaves us with Ryan, Scanlon, who's on an independent line, Michael Gaynor on an independent line, and James Gardner, who's been the Republican candidate for several months now. Do you think it's likely that those will be the 4 remaining candidates in November, or do you think this might shake out a little bit more? And that largely, I think, depends on what Scanlon decides to do.
Yeah, it's hard to say at this point. At his event last night, Chris Scanlon did not say whether he would run or not. He was asked several times by reporters. In the heat of the moment, it was probably difficult for him to make that decision. He said he's going to reflect upon it. He has the line. He has an opportunity to go after independent, conservative, and Republican voters who are not eligible to vote. This time around, it's in total, I think, about 6% of the electorate,
Right.
But that can make a difference
Sure.
in a race that was only divided by 11 points among Democrats.
Right.
So he certainly has an opportunity, and I think depending on the sort of fundraising he would be able to achieve in the second time around, he does, I will say this, he has a significant amount more money left on hand than Ryan does.
Right.
So he's got that head start. But it's hard to raise money when you've just lost. So it will be a lot of, as he said, soul searching as he looks forward and whether or not he wants to go through what he just went through, which is, these campaigns are hard to run and hard on your family. So he'll have to think about whether he wants to do that again and risk the possibility of losing a second time.
Right.
So
we know that there were 5 candidates on the ballot for Democrats yesterday, and the 3 that were, I think, widely seen as the long shots, again, they might not have said this, but it appeared that way to us, were Whitfield, Rasheed Wyatt, and Anthony Tyson Thompson. With all the votes counted, they combined for less than 20% of the total vote. What conclusion, if any, can we draw from that?
Again, I would just point back to the fundraising.
Yeah.
They, more than $2 million was spent on this race. About 98% of that, I think, came from the two candidates that we have identified as the front runners. When you don't have money, it's just harder to get your messaging out. There, of course, is social media, but it just, many people don't take their political messaging in that way.
Right.
So even though social media does play a significant role in campaigns these days, there's just, they cannot make up for what radio, television advertising, and mailers
Right.
do in an election.
Yeah, money is often, almost always, a deciding factor. So now the city, not to mention you and I, turn our attention to what will be coming in November. And although we said, and it's being widely said today, that Ryan has the inside track, it's a heavily Democratic city, and he now has that key nomination. We don't have to go back too far to remember the last time somebody won a Democratic primary, did not win the job of mayor. That was India Walton in 2021. Byron Brown overcame the hurdle of a loss in the Democratic primary. Can you envision a similar fate awaiting Ryan?
This is a really different dynamic. So, you know, Scanlon would have to run, as he already has, from the right of Ryan, but the gap between Ryan and Scanlon, both in experience and simply in like political outlook, are much more narrow.
Right.
So I think it actually would give Scanlon a decent chance at this, but having the line is also a huge factor. But it's just such a different dynamic. India Walton, was a Democratic socialist, far left progressive, and Byron had much more name recognition, much more fundraising ability. These two candidates are much more evenly matched in those categories. So.
Right. We'll be spending the next 4.5 months almost now getting to Reno, Sean Ryan, hearing more about James Gardner, hearing probably more about Michael Gaynor, and we will see what that leads to in November. Justin, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for watching us on BuffaloNews.com, and we'll see you with Talk on Politics again soon.